Hello everybody, today we are going to discuss the Prologue to the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. So Geoffrey Chaucer, who is known as the father of English poetry, one of the greatest storyteller in verse, and he was born in 1343, and there is, it's not certain, or say there is a dispute about this, that we don't have the exact year of birth, that when he was born. So generally it is said, okay, in 1340s he was born, and in some books it is found to be 1343, and he died in 1400. And he wrote several poems, several works. Among them it was the Book of Duchess, which was written in 1369. Then we have other works as well, like Troilus and Cresside. It was written somewhere between 1380 and 1383. Then it was the Parliament of Fowls, which was written in 1382. Then the House of Fame, which was written in 1384. Then we had, of course, the Legends of Good Women, which was written in somewhere 1384 or 85, and the last one, which was the Canterbury Tales, which remained unfinished. And Troilus and Cresside is said to be the best complete or finest complete work by Chaucer, though of course the Canterbury Tales is the best work of Chaucer, but it was not complete, it remained unfinished. So, and here in this work, Chaucer is at his highest form, is at his greatest form. He had attained full maturity by that time, and he then comes out to be in this as the greatest storyteller in the verse form. Or through this we can say he has rendered a great service to storytelling in verse, or greater service to verse as well, we can say. So his really the easy flow and the wondrous melody is really superb in this work, and we can compare this with his predecessors in this way. And in person, if I talk of his personality, so in person he was corpulent, like that the owner of the Tabard Inn, and we can say he was fair, and his eyes were downcast and meditative, looked quite intelligent, and he had some elvish quality or elvish element about him, which would attract anyone who came into his contact for the first time. So he was such a sort of person, and he lived hermit-like, but he was not a recluse. He was not a loner, and he talked less and loved to listen to others. He liked good company, pleasant company, liked to listen to other people in that way. And there is we don't know much about actually his education and his children, that how many children, no clarity is about that, even about his second wife or so, as generally said. So there is no clarity about these personal aspects of Chaucer. Now, as a poet, his journey can be divided into three parts, or three periods, we can say. So first it was the French period, or I can say the translation period, in which actually he translated French works. And the major work was the translation of Roman de la Rose, a French poem which was actually written by Guillaume de Loris, and the other poet was Jane de Monk. So it was composed by these two poets, and the major part was written by Jane de Monk, and Chaucer translated that work, that Roman de la Rose, in English. So that was actually the first part, the French period or the translation period. The second period spans from 1379 to 1385. In this period he actually moved from translation to imitation, and the other works, namely Troilus and Cresside and the House of Fame and the Legends of Good Women. So all these works come under this period, or he composed them, he wrote those works in this period. And then comes his third period, and that was after 1387, and in that period he wrote the Canterbury Tales, when he attained full maturity as a poet and he could experiment with his experience and skills there. So it was written in his third period, and this Canterbury Tales actually it runs over, or it comprises over 17,000 lines, and it begins with the description of the season of April, when everything is coming back to life. There was freshness in the air, the flowers are blooming, so there is like fertility in the atmosphere and all. So that kind of atmosphere is there, and he is beginning with the description of that atmosphere. So, and the prologue actually, so the prologue is about 858 lines, and here in this prologue and in this video actually I'm going to discuss all the important things, so that you won't have to go through any book to understand what it is. Moreover, you will be able to deal with any sort of question that is generally asked in university exams, and moreover I will add some MCQs at the end which have been asked in several competitive exams. So I'll add all those things. So it's going to be a complete package for you, so you won't have to worry about anything after going through this whole video. So this is how it began. Now with Chaucer, English language actually all flourished. It just grew ceaselessly in its structure and its form. Means no other medieval writer was a match for Chaucer in the technique and verse form and anything that we can say, whether it is complexity, the range. So he was actually at the top, and he drew his material from anywhere he got. Like he drew his material from French works, from Italian works, and also from Latin as well. And Chaucer, we can say, he is also considered to be the first modern English poet. And before Chaucer actually, the popular literature used the heroes and the gods of golden age, means they were the characters in the works. So you can think of Beowulf. So such works actually had heroes and legends of the golden age. But Chaucer brought about a change in that, and he used men and women from the society. So there was realism in his works. The real characters were there. The men and women of the contemporary age and times were used as the characters in his works. So he portrayed them in a very realistic manner, and he is simply reflecting the society, not at all he is criticizing. There is no stern moralist, or we can say a reformer, not even a dreamer we see in Chaucer in reflecting or portraying those characters of his times. What he does in Canterbury actually, he just provides us a wide sweep of the prevalent conditions of those times, say we can say a motley variety of the kind of people of those times, the kind of society of those times. That's what he has done in his work. Now his eminence actually depends on much upon his technical command as well as the contents of his writing. He was actually a sophisticated craftsman of this art. of numerous metrical and verse patterns and techniques which he used, the stanzaic forms, the lyrical forms, the narrative art. So he was a craftsman, we can say, of all these things. We can say he used octosyllables in in the House of Fame, Rhyme Royal in Troilus and Cresside, and most part of Canterbury Tales was actually pentametric couplets he used, and it was all adapted as per the demands and the need of the verse and the kind of things he represented there. So accordingly he used all that, and he was also, we can say, an inventor and master of heroic couplets. That also can be said about. Now we can say the other poets might have surpassed Chaucer in the depth and the power of metrical forms and so, but in gusto and sheer enjoyment there was no match to Chaucer. Like the way he presented the kaleidoscopic character of human nature, so there was no match to him in the gusto and sheer enjoyment of that, and the way he portrayed that in his work. So different critics, time and again different critics have expressed different opinions about Chaucer and his works. So I'll begin with John Dryden here. That John Dryden, he venerated Chaucer just like the Romans venerated Virgil or the Greeks venerated Homer. So he venerated Chaucer in that way, and he said, or he thought, that he must have a comprehensive nature, because he had taken into in his consideration, or taken into in his compass so many characters, and from all the levels, all the strata of society. So, and moreover, to quote him exactly, we can say that here is plenty of gold. That's what Chaucer said about that's what Dryden said about Chaucer and his work, that here is God's plenty, as there was really a wide variety, and that too in a very perfect measure and perfect manner. So it was quite rightly said by John Dryden. Then Hazlitt, we have Hazlitt, what that Hazlitt said. So Hazlitt compared actually Edmund Spenser and Geoffrey Chaucer, and he said that Spenser delighted in luxurious enjoyment and Chaucer in severe activity of mind. Spenser was a visionary, he was a romantic, and Chaucer was a practical man, he was a realist. And his poetry reads like history, that we can, it portrays actually downright reality, that's what he said. Matthew Arnold was also, we can say, he liked Chaucer and he admired Chaucer, and he said that his works, Chaucer actually was nourished on the French poetry, French Romance poetry of 12th and 13th century, and his superiority of Chaucer's poetry actually lies in the substance and the style, both. And he admires Chaucer for his fluidity of diction and the fluidity of movement as well, and the irresistible joy in his works, and that's how it comes out. Like as he said, his successors actually spoke of his golden dewdrops of speech. And saying all this, though he admires Chaucer and he had praised Chaucer, still he says that he refuses to consider Chaucer to be one of the great classical writers. He doesn't consider him to be a classical writer or the great classics. Now, if we appreciate, now here comes the appreciation of this work, and this work is the prologue actually. It runs over 858 lines, it is up to 858 lines, and moreover there are, in the Canterbury Tales, there are 21 complete tales and then 3 unfinished tales. So that's how it comes to total 24 tales in total. And though actually total of 120 tales were to be narrated as arranged by the owner of the tavern in Southwark, Harry Bailey. Actually what he arranged in such a way that he said that everybody in the journey to the Canterbury the Canterbury, and so how was it actually? They were all pilgrims and they met at the tavern, and it was the month of April, and it was said that as arranged by this Harry Bailey, the owner of that tavern, the host, that everybody in his journey to Canterbury would narrate two tales while going and two tales while returning. So in this way, all those 30 pilgrims were to narrate say 4 tales, 2 while going and 2 while returning, and in that way it would be total 120 tales. But only 21 tales are there complete and 3 unfinished ones we have. So this was how it all was arranged. Moreover, including Chaucer, there were 30 characters, as I said, and here actually in this work he blended his sense of actuality with the sense of hierarchy, as he has brought the characters from different strata of society. So he has blended actuality and hierarchy both in this, and the historians can actually rebuild the history with his work, we can say, or as has been said by the critics. And you can actually through this prologue you can picture the twin ladder of society, that is the church and also the state, without even a single rung missing. That's how it has been said by the critics. And now the characters here, so I'll tell you about each and every character, but first just a sweep through this appreciation. So a high kind of blood is to be found in the knight and his son Squire. The land-owning Franklin represents a lesser gentry. So it begins with the topmost gentry of the society, knight and the squire, then the Franklin, who was a lesser gentry. Learned professions appear in the sergeant at law and the physician, and the merchant stands for the rich upper class, man of commerce, the emerging new class of say exporters and exchange manipulators, beginners of capitalism. Then haberdasher and his associates represent slightly smaller fry of London of those times. The wife of Bath, a provincial lady, a cloth maker, expert in say newest and most important of England's industry of those times. Another provincial person was a shipman, who was honor and a master mariner. So these were of some rank, and they had servants at the home. They commanded some prestige and enjoyed some prestige as well. Then next were some churl folk, means we can say persons of low birth. So of whom we can talk of Miller. Miller was the grandest with powerful muscles, and so then the servant class, upper servants like manciple, reeve, low servants like yeoman, cook, and each pair representing the town and the country between them. An absolute bottom of the social class, we had the plowman, and though he was at the bottom, but he was next to knight in Christianity, in religion, in we can say gentlemanliness, so he was next to knight. And Chaucer actually was fully and exactly the church too was fully and exactly represented here. The monk from monastery, the prioress from the convent, the other attendant priests, the village parson, the roaming friar. So they cover all the strands of church of those times, the religious categories, the courtly pretensions of the prioress, and the humble origin of parson. Also showed in comparative, we can say, importance, and somewhere between the lay folk and the churchman came the clerk of Oxford. He too was also there, and below all these there were summoner and the pardoner, and they were hated. Both were hated by the people of those times. And apart from this methodic and artistic skill which must have gone into presenting all these characters here, the greater triumph was to present them in the haphazardry of life, and moreover he actually presented them in a glorious manner. So of course a genius of Chaucer we can see in that he could think of the two places where all these characters can meet, and they were of course that Tabard Inn, the other was Canterbury, where all these people can be united, and also the situation, the circumstances where he could bring them all together, and that was the pilgrimage, where people from all stratas could be bring together. So this is of course his genius, his wisdom, his wit and his skills that allowed him to do this task in such a manner. And then apart from all this we can say there was his attitude. So of course his attitude also to be noticed in his created world, that he is so bland and so unself-conscious and so mild a spectator of the world that he had created, and also of the times that he is dealing with, that he presents himself as a very simple person, as if naively watching all the things and presenting them the way they were, without adding actually his bit to that, simply just telling them to the readers. So he we can say that in that way he could be simple without naivete, romantic without foolishness, and ironical without cruelty. So such is what we the description we find here. And he does not actually exaggerate or look for some freaks, rather he takes delight in the representing the world as it was, as he finds it. So there is realism, there is sharp individuality, there is adroit psychology and vividness in this work. Now let's come to the characters and also the satire and irony that goes into it. So his characterization, actually it's really brilliant in this. We definitely must praise Chaucer for that, and he used different method for each character here, and he conveys a strong sense of individuality and also depth of portraiture in this. Moreover, in every case he presents different opinions, the usual activities, and also the different dwelling places of the persons or the characters mentioned here, and through that he gives them an individuality of their own. And himself he presents as a foolish person, as I already said. So the sugar coating of naivete contrasts pleasantly with the sharpness of wit, and that delights us actually. And it's not that all the characters are dealt with satire or irony. It depends on the character and depends on the mood as well. So all the characters have been presented in terms of their occupation. There is an element of idealization, that each character represents that level of society in a perfect manner. So he has treated the character quite honestly and in a very perfect manner. So almost every person, whether good or bad, has been treated as the best example of that particular kind. And there is some exaggeration, there is, we can say, he has outlined the characters in a certain manner that separates them from the other category or character, we can say. And the characters that he has satirized are livelier than the other characters which he hasn't. And the first character to be introduced is of course the knight, one who stands at the top level of the society, and moreover the story as well was told by the knight in the beginning, as they had decided to take a draw, and in that draw it was the knight who was to tell the story. And so how this knight is an idealized portrait. He loved truth, he loved honesty, he actually loved freedom as well, and he fought for Christian faith as against pagan. He was a man who traveled far and wide. He fought in different battles. He went to Lithuania, Prussia, Russia, and Granada, Alexandria. He visited so many places, and he was a brave and as well as wise person, and he wore simple clothes, not at all gaudy ones. And while he was on the pilgrimage, his clothes were also, he was wearing a coarse doublet, and that was all soiled because he had recently returned from an adventure, and then he joined the pilgrimage. So he never cared for his clothes. He was a simple kind of person who held the virtues of bravery and honesty and truth quite high, and was quite a worthy man. And that was the kind of we can say code of behavior that prevailed among knights of those times. Then the next is his son Squire. So he was a youthful romantic person, quite a passionate one. He loved intensely, and he had participated in some campaigns, and he hoped that because of his performances in those campaigns he could win the love of a lady whom he loved. His clothes were gaudy, and they were all embroidered with white and red flowers, and he could sing well, he could dance well, he could write well, he could draw well. He was a study in contrast to his father. And though of course Chaucer actually has drawn this character in terms of his youth, his passion, and of course he has presented them as worthy of his position as well. So he could play on flute as well. So all these qualities have been shown in the son here. Then there comes the yeoman. So yeoman was the servant and attendant, and here actually he was a forester, but forester not the one who would preserve or who would actually take care of the forest. His task was to arrange the game for the night, and he would always wear a green hood and would carry some arrows, the peacock, which was actually made of peacock sheath, I should say, sheaf of peacock arrows he had, and also what a sword, a buckler, a dagger, and a mighty bow. So he could deal with his equipment quite efficiently. He was short, and moreover he had a brown face. He was quite efficient in woodcraft, and he had a silver medal of Saint Christopher. He was a man of substance. So this was our yeoman. Then we have Prioress, and the character of Prioress has been dealt in quite detail by Chaucer, and it seemed that he loved this character, and he was quite an amusing description of this Prioress has been presented here in this Canterbury Tales in the prologue as well. So how it is, she actually has been presented at both levels, secular and the worldly level, and Chaucer actually had emphasized on the worldly aspect of her character. So quite plenty of irony he has used in describing her character. We are told that she was full of charity and pity, and yet it comes out that it is an ironical statement on her, because she would cry. It has been said that she would cry if she would see a mouse dead or casualty on other creatures, but then her pet dogs were fed with finest roasted meat. So it was pity and charity were all in terms of her dogs only, and her table manners were very refined and sophisticated. She would not let even a morsel drop while eating, and she would not dip her fingers into the sauce. She would take care of all that, and moreover there would not be any trace, any grease on the cup from which she would drink. So she had such sophisticated table manners, and her name was Eglantine. She could sing very well. Moreover, her dressing sense was also very good, not like the nuns of church. It has also been presented as a worldly quality of this nun. Moreover, she spoke French, and that too was actually flaunting herself, because her French was not Parisian French, a different one, and it seems that Chaucer is trying to say that was simply to show off and flaunt. And she had a brooch which had an inscription, Amor vincit omnia, which means love conquers all. And this too seems to be quite ambiguous. Now this love, whether it is worldly love or spiritual love, so that ambiguity is there in this statement also. So he describes her in such a manner that creates amusement, moreover a confusion about her. And she was quite a beauty, small face, quite delicate. There was a delicacy about her. So that's all he talks of. Moreover, her wimple was neatly pleated. So wimple is actually the headgear which you can see the nuns wearing. So there was a sophistication, a refinement about her in everything she did, and a worldly aspect to everything she did, and she wore and she ate and whatever she performed. So that's what he is trying to say. Then it is the monk. He was an outrider and who loved hunting. He had say good hounds who would help him in hunting. He did not care for biblical objections to all the things that he did. He never followed the instructions of Saint Augustine. Rather, he would say his instructions or the directives of Saint Augustine are for himself, or should be reserved for himself. We cannot follow those directives in the present times. This was what he used to say. So he defied all those things, and what he also had so many good horses and in his stables, and the jingle of the bells of his horses could be heard from the distance. And so in the character of this monk as well, he is showing that how he defied the norms and the rules that were to be followed by a monk. Saint Augustine said that the monk should be doing all the work with their own hand. They should be in the cloister, but he was never in the or he didn't like to be in the cloister in the church. He would always ride out on his horses, and moreover he had to fasten his hood under the chin. He had a gold pin which had a love note at the end. He wore supple boots and his face was all shiny, and he loved roasted swan the best. Then here comes the friar. So Friar was a merry fellow, and he paid for the right to beg in his area. Means he was a man who would have to beg for churches and himself. So here Chaucer has presented many characters in a tongue-in-cheek manner, that is in an ironical manner, a satirical manner, and there was no such man as Friar in the whole of we can say England in those times. He was a man of gossips, a man of flattery. He performed number of marriages of young women at his own cost. Actually, the Chaucer here is suggesting that he seduced women and then he married them off. He was quite well acquainted with the rich farmers and worthy women, and not at all acquainted with the lepers and beggars of his times. Though he was to be actually a friar, was to be acquainted with the beggars and lepers, but actually he couldn't make money from them, so it was a useless thing for him. He was licensed for confessions from the papal court. He had a papal license for confessions, and he would actually hear confessions very sweetly and promptly. He gave a penance actually, and he would get good remuneration for all that. And he was of the opinion that sinners should be, instead of repenting and weeping and crying, actually should give money to the poor friars, and that is the best thing to come out of all this, rather than weeping and crying. And he actually used very sweet language to the women, and if the language failed, then he had ornamental knives and brooch pins to offer. He knew taverns and barmaids of all the areas there very well, and he was quite courteous and humble in rendering services. On love day he made money by acting as an arbitrator among those pairs who actually had some disputes, and thus he made money by sorting out their disputes. He was an immoral and corrupt fellow, but he had some good qualities as well. He could sing well and play on fiddle very well. So next here we have the merchant. And the merchant is a very typical businessman who dealt with everything in terms of profit, and he lent money on interest. Chaucer's clerk. Now after this merchant we had the clerk. So merchant hasn't been dealt in detail. He was a man who would think of always profits, increase in his profits, and always lent money on interest and such. Now clerk was devoted to learning, and he always studied. He was a man, he didn't spoke much, he spoke very little, but whatever he spoke, there would be substance in that. He would pray for those who would help him in his studies, and his clothes were actually worn out because he didn't pay attention to his clothes. Whatever money he got, he spent them all in purchasing books and in his studies. And so such a man he was a man of moral virtue, and who would always emphasize on that. His words would be full of high meaning. Then we have sergeant at law. So sergeant at law actually was quite a skilled person at his task. He could mention, or he could pronounce all the cases from the time of William the Conqueror He knew all those cases in the statute books from those times, and he could draft a document or present a deed in such a skilled manner that nobody could find fault with that. And in that way he actually had accumulated a lot of wealth. He would get wealth and robes from his clients, and there was fraudery in his task, trickery in his task, and he was a good buyer of land. No one else was a good buyer than him of the land, and he actually, whatever land he would buy, he would establish unrestricted possession on that. And he was quite busy, but he seemed busier than he was. So that's how, this is what we say, tongue-in-cheek manner. The Chaucer has satirized the character of Sergeant at Law. Then we have Franklin, and about Franklin Chaucer says that he was the son of Epicurus. He was a man who loved good food and wine. His day would start with a soap of wine, and no one had a cellar full of different varieties of wine, and he would enjoy eating and drinking, and he was a good host as well. He would offer food and drinks to all those who came to his house. He was a rich person as well. He had variety of partridges at his home, and also different varieties of fish in his pond, and always his dining table would be ready with different kind of dishes and things, and he changed his food as per the seasons. According to the seasons, there would be different variety of dishes and food at his home. So he was such a man, always ready to host people and provide a good dish or food to the people whoever came to his home. So that is our Franklin. Then we have 5 guildsmen, and though they belong to different trades, but they wore the same kind of livery just to show the unity and fraternity. And their knives were mounted with silver. The girdles and pouches accorded well with their knives, and they were good citizens, actually wealthy ones, and quite fit to be aldermen of those times, like the councillor to be seated on the dais. So they were like that, and he doesn't spare their wives even. They were quite ambitious. They always wanted to be at the head of all the festivities, and they wanted themselves to be addressed madam. They wanted their servants to carry their mantle behind them. So he just, we can say, Chaucer makes fun at the cost of these wives of these people. They actually could afford servants at their home, so could maintain their standard. Means they commanded, we can say, prestige in the society, and they also had a cook with them, so that they could have good food all during their pilgrimage. And this cook could boil and broil, and could bake and roast anything for them, could prepare spicy chicken for them, and he had an ulcer on his shin, and he was one of the disreputable men of Chaucer's pilgrims. Then we have Shipman. So the Shipman actually had an inability to ride. He couldn't ride well. He had a dagger hanging with a string or cord around his neck, and Chaucer deal with Shipman in an ironical manner, that actually he was a cheat. So a merchant actually had handed him over his material to be protected, and he was paying him, but actually he stole his wine and goods from his goods. He won battle at sea, and after that what he did, he unburdened himself by throwing those prisoners into the sea. And then apart from that, we can say that he was an expert. He had some good qualities as well. He was an expert in calculating the tides in the sea. He could also judge the ocean currents, and he could know what dangers could beset him there in the sea. He could steer the ship accordingly. So he was an expert in all that, how to reach his destination at proper time. He knew all that quite well, but he was shrewd in his undertakings. His beard had weathered many storms. Now after him we have the doctor of medicine. So doctor of medicine had a great authority in the treatment of various ailments. Actually, he had a knowledge of the stars as well, and he could study the movement of stars and the impact they would have on different people and their body and their ailments. So accordingly he could treat those diseases, and he knew all the chemists of those area, and thus they had some arrangement in profit, whatever they would have. So we can understand that from Chaucer's time, from those times, this kind of arrangement, this kind of we can say system was there between the doctor and the chemist, that they had share in their profits. So it was going since those times. So and that has been quite finely portrayed by Chaucer in his work. And he knew all the principal authors of medicine, but his knowledge of Bible was meager, and he was a miserly person. He loved gold, and he said that gold is actually ingredient in different medicines as well. The next and the most amusing character and the most popular character in the Canterbury Tales is the wife of Bath, and she was deaf, and this deafness actually was the result of a blow from one of her husbands. She actually married 5 people, and it was from her 5th husband that she got a blow, and that made her deaf. She was quite good at making clothes, and one of the growing industries of those times, and she had different love affairs as well in her times. She could laugh and enjoy in the company of people, and she was an expert in relationship and all such kind of things. On Sundays, the kind of kerchief she would wear, it would be of 10 pounds in weight. She was a gape-toothed lady, and she could ride on a horse quite well. She had also undertaken different pilgrimages. She knew very well about different places. So such a kind of lady she was. And then we have Parson. So Chaucer's Parson was a study in sheer goodness. He was poor in worldly sense, but rich in spirituality and holiness, was a man of learning, and he truly preached what he practiced. He actually preached the Gospels of Christ. He never shirked visiting his parishioners on account of rain or thunder or lightning. Means he never made any excuses. Whatever be the condition, he would visit his parishioners in trouble, and he never tried to make extra money by working for some other guild or by just threatening to excommunicate people. He of course rebuked the sinners if they didn't mend their ways, though he spoke very softly to them. He was very sympathetic and kind-hearted, and he tried to make them understand that how they can come out of their sins. But if they didn't understand, then he would scold them as well. Then we have a plowman, and this plowman was the brother of Parson. He was a very good kind person, always prayed to the Lord, whether in adversity or prosperity. He was always in the service of Lord. And though he was at the bottom of we can say the social status, but he was next to a knight in Christianity, and in goodness of heart and the nobility of heart. He was next to the knight, and he could help anybody in the name of Lord. He lived his life quite peacefully and in charity. In delineating Miller, Chaucer has emphasized on his physical attributes, his physical quality, that he was a muscular person, a man of strong bones and muscles. He could break open a door, striking with his head. On the tip of his nose there was a wart, and the wart had a tuft of red hair. He had a large mouth, nostrils, carried a sword and a buckler, and he was a loose talker. Actually, he indulged in, we can say, obscene jokes, indecent stories. He was a cheat as well. He would cheat and trick the customers, and he would charge them thrice the actual fee that he should actually charge them. So he would charge them thrice the actual fee. But he had some good qualities. He had musical taste, could play on bagpipe well. Then we have Manciple. So he was an expert in buying provisions, and anybody could learn much from him about that art. Whether he bought the provisions in cash or in credit, but he would always be the gainer. He worked for 60 masters, but nobody, he could trick them all in his task of buying provisions. He could outwit them all, and his duties actually included accounting for foodstuff and supervising the kitchen and the cook. Then we have the Reeve, a slender person, ill-tempered person. His beard shaved closed, his hair also cut high round his ears, clipped short in front. Legs were like sticks, long sticks. He was a double dealer, and he could maintain a granary and a store with such skills that no auditor could find any loophole there. And he was in his position for 20 years, so he knew all the tricks of his profession. All the other workers were afraid of him like plague, because he knew their weaknesses and he could use them against them. Moreover, he was a very crafty person. He was a very cunning person. What he would do, he would actually lend the things of his lord to him, or his things to the lord, and in that way he had accumulated much wealth and property. Moreover, his master, his lord, would never know his trickery, and on the contrary, he would be rewarded with a hood and robes and other things for whatever he would do. Whether he would lend his things or lend their things to him, in every way he would be the gainer, and he would be rewarded even for that by his lord. So he was such a man. The character of Reeve and Miller stand in contrast to each other, and in the journey one would be in the beginning and the other would be at the end. So one thing that I missed here is actually that they were going to the shrine of Sir Saint Thomas a Becket, which was there in the Canterbury, and it was the month of April, which has been described in the beginning, which was the time of actually fertility, freshness, when the flowers were blooming and blossoming. So this is the way he had started the description, or he had a description of this journey, this Canterbury Tales. So now we have the summoner. Summoner was morally corrupt, and he could allow anybody to keep a mistress for 12 months just for a quart of wine. and he could also take advantage of a girl, and he would ask people not to be afraid of archdeacon's curse. He would simply tell them that they only have to pay him, and he would free them from the curse, release them from the curse. He had a good control over the young people of his area, which were those who would come under his jurisdiction, because he actually know their secrets well, and he would actually force them to pay them for all that. His headgear was as large as the sign of an alehouse, and moreover his buckler was the size of a huge loaf of bread. So he was a character, his character was a combination of physical ailments, gastronomic excesses, lechery, hypocrisy and impiety. He was a combination of all this. Now we have a medieval partner as well, and his task involved selling indulgences. He sold indulgences and also some religious relics, and also did some preachings. So his bag was always full of indulgences, which he claimed to have got directly from the Pope of Rome. And he also had in possession some relics which he claimed or which he said that they were quite holy relics. A pillow in his possession was actually Virgin Mary's veil. So that's how he presented those things in his possession, just a pillow. So the pillow would be actually Virgin Mary's veil, and a canvas in his possession would become St. Peter's sail. The bones of pig would be the bones of some saint. So all his bogus relics, he could cheat a parson, and whatever a parson would earn in 2 months, he would make that much money just in one day by befooling the parson. And he would do all that with utter sincerity, and though he knew his work very well, means he knew how to sing well, how to read a passage from Bible, how to narrate the story of a saint, and he knew how to recite an anthem preparatory to the ceremonial offering of bread and wine. So he knew his task very well. So, and this partner was a fitting companion to Summoner. He would sing a love ditty in his company actually, and he had some effeminate character, actually a gay sort of person, as has been shown here. His hair were yellowish like a flax, which show actually lack of virility, and also the kind of clothes he would wear, the style that he would follow also shows the lack of virility and manliness in him. Now, in talking about himself, Chaucer assumes a role of a simple man, and devoid of literary pretensions, and simply to entertain his readers. He was both a pilgrim and a man who was to record all the events, including the tales told by all the pilgrims. And Chaucer explains his method, and he hopes courtesy from the readers. The reason that he says that he has presented everything in a very crude manner, so the readers would say pardon or excuse him for all that, and to support his deed he actually quote Christ and Plato both. So about Christ he says that Christ spoke broadly enough in Holy Writ, and he was not immoral. So how could he be immoral in talking in a crude manner or representing them the way they were? So how could he be immoral or wrong in that? Moreover, about Plato, he said that Plato said that word should be cousin to deed. So he is quite right in following Plato here, that he is presenting the way they are. So this is how, and moreover he also asks for, he says sorry to the readers, he apologizes for his technique and style, because he says that he is, my wit is short and ye may well understand, means I am a man of low wit and less wisdom, so will excuse me for the lack of technique and style in this work. So that's what, how he, and in this he manages to actually convey a kind of wit, and like there is an undertone of, we can say, irony here as well, a humor here, and then we have the host. So the host was a large, dominating, jovial kind of person, a jolly sort of person, efficient organizer, an intelligent person, and he was the man who arranged everything in a perfect manner. He was the man who suggested that they would narrate the story while going to Canterbury and then returning as well, to story, to the journey and then to back from the journey, and who would begin telling the stories. For that he takes a draw, and in that draw it was the knight who comes first. Moreover, he asked them to raise their hands in consent, that if they were all in consent to this, or if there is any objection. So there it was not debate, whatever he said was agreed unanimously by all, there was no objection from anyone in this. So this is how the character of this man, the host Harry Valley, comes out. So everything has been presented in a perfect manner. So his work is actually a microcosm of those time, a cross section of 14th century it presents. There is humor in the representation of different characters, and the characters of each strata of society have been perfectly dealt with by Chaucer. And apart from that, we can also say that Chaucer comes out as a modern poet as well. He doesn't come out to be a reformer. He hasn't tried to reform the society. He didn't try to bring out any changes in the society. He didn't try to remove the problems of those times. Rather, he simply presents them what they were and what it was in those times. So not a moralist, not a dreamer, just a simple viewer who presents the things as it is. And at the end, I can say that how we can judge this work as a modern work, or the poet as a modern poet. So he has done a realistic portrayal of the characters, sympathetic representation of life of common people has been done here. Moreover, there is objectivity in the portrayal of the characters and a detachment in the treatment of life in this work. Moreover, he has employed irony and satire in a perfect manner, and he has used conversational and colloquial tone in this. So these are the qualities on the basis of which we can say there is a perfect or he can be said as a modern poet, or this work as a modern work of literature. So this is how all the things have been presented in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, and I'll come up with more such things, even the tales in the I'll tell you about the tales in the Canterbury and also other literary things. So and moreover, I have a taste, some important multiple choice questions, some objective questions at the end of this video, so don't miss them as well. Please continue watching till the end. You will definitely love it, and I hope you will share this work with the other students and other people as well.